Hi, I'm Lee, and before I begin, I feel I must apologize ahead of time for my enunciation. I have orthodontics, and I'm still not quite used to them, so if I sound like I'm speaking with a mouth full of mashed potatoes, there's no need to adjust your sound system. It's probably just my braces. And no, that's not me. That's Ben Stiller. This is me, just before getting my braces. Although some of you might better recognize me as my alter ego, the pirate teacher. Aye, matey. Arr. Before I go too far off the deep end, allow me to share with you my field experience journey in Gale's Ed 201 class. A big part of the story is the practical field experience. However, there is more to my story. You see, at 47 years old, as the principal at my cooperating school pointed out, I'm not the typical Ed 201 student. After more than 20 years as an engineer and manager in the manufacturing industry, I began to wonder about the value of my contribution to the world and the future. What will be my legacy? After some prayer and not a small amount of contemplation, I came to the realization that my personal gifting and subsequent fulfillment comes from working with the youth in my community in sports, scouts, church activities, and other venues, including teaching. I've earned a bachelor's degree in electronic engineering, but that was more than 20 years ago. Nevertheless, as it turns out, I qualify to participate in the Passport to Teaching program through the American Board for the Certification of Teacher Excellence, or the ABCTE. It allows me to study for and take the state teaching exam. After about 10 months of studying, I'm happy to say that I have successfully passed both the professional teaching knowledge test and the general science exam. I still need to pass one more exam to qualify for my certificate, either math or physics. I plan to take both, but I have more studying to do first. I didn't want to wait for my certificate before getting into a classroom, and Ed 201 was the perfect opportunity to get some classroom time and at the same time introduce myself to some of the local teaching community. In fact, I even accepted a position to the Lakeland Timberlake Joint School District and its STEM Charter Academy in Rathdrum as a substitute teacher. And as a result, I've been subbing like crazy, which I have been absolutely loving. I highly recommend it. If you're seriously considering teaching and you have some time available, you should apply. So now that you understand where I'm coming from, and assuming you haven't already stopped this video, allow me to share with you my Ed 201 practicum field experience. I met with my cooperating teacher, Mr. Baker, and his principal, Mr. Spear, on February 12th, and after their initial shock at realizing the unique nature of my situation, they welcomed me to their school. Their only request was that we settle on a schedule and then stick to it. I assured them that that is exactly what I intended. It was a real joy to spend time in Mr. Baker's and other teachers' classrooms. He has a soft rapport with the students. When he calls their attention, he calls them boys and girls. I've always strived to address teenagers as ladies and gentlemen. However, they seem to respond to Mr. Baker's reference quite favorably. I think they respect his soft nature, and by extension, they know that his intentions are respectful. My personality is a bit different, and I feel referring to them as ladies and gentlemen, it sets a tone of expectation regarding their behavior. Another thing that really stuck out to me was how clean and organized Mr. Baker's room was. His walls are not cluttered with postings. Rather, he only has the rules clearly written in one area on the side of the whiteboard. His bookcases, they store books neatly without unnecessary knickknacks. The desks are arranged in a 6x5 grid, less one in the back right corner near the door. Mr. Baker's desk is positioned in the back of the room, and his teaching table, which is about belly height, is positioned in the front of the class, where the whiteboard and projector are located. Except for the cul-de-sacs in the center two columns caused by the teaching table, the classroom is very conducive to learning and allows a fairly good mobility of the teacher. I asked Mr. Baker if he had considered other configurations, to which he said that his options were really limited because of the size of the room. He has a seating chart for each class, and the grid makes take and roll very simple. Mr. Baker also has a bank of calculators, which are stored in a rack for the students to use. The calculators are simple, identical, and are relatively middle schooler proof. I have heard them hit the floor several times, and they haven't broken. This is an excellent resource for his math students. On February 26th, I spoke to Mr. Baker about teaching a lesson in his class, and he told me I could teach whatever lesson I wanted. We looked ahead in his schedule and decided I would teach on probability. He said I could teach any class I wanted, or all of his classes. And I was pretty excited about the possibility, and I agreed to teach this subject to every class on a given day. That day was Friday of the following week, March 6th. I created a lesson plan based on the textbook that he'd been teaching from. I brought a roll of pennies for a gathering activity. As the students arrived to class, I greeted them at the door and handed each one a penny and a tally sheet. and instructed them to follow the instructions on the whiteboard, where I had written, "Flip your penny 100 times and record the results on the tally sheet." By the time the bell had rang, they were all busy flipping and writing. Then I told them to stop. We collected the pennies, and I totaled their results on the whiteboard to begin the discussion on probability. Each class went really well. However, the fourth period, an advanced math class, seemed all but asleep. After collecting the initial data, I realized I was losing their interest. As I surveyed the classroom, it looked like a swamp full of alligators. That they were all staring at me, but they were somewhere else mentally. Perhaps they were bored with the lesson, or perhaps they were just drowsy from after eating lunch. Whatever the reason, I had to do something. So I stopped the lesson, and I told them, "I'm stopping the lesson." Then I said, "You guys want to see something interesting?" I think Mr. Baker was mildly concerned about where I was going with this. Now, I was wearing a tie, as I always do when I teach, and I rolled up both the large and the small end of the tie separately. The students, they started sitting up in their seats, wondering what I was doing. I asked them, "Now, if I let go of the tie ends at the same time, which one would unroll first?" The students started blurting out answers, and so I asked, "How many think the large would unroll first?" And then I asked, "How many do you think the smaller would unroll first?" And the class was relatively evenly divided. So I said, "Let's find out. We're going to find out in 3, 2, 1, and I'll let go." After a couple of seconds, I exclaimed, "It's a tie!" The class burst into laughter. And now that I had their attention, and they realized I was going to be relatively interesting to listen to, I was able to continue the lesson. Now that turned out to be a great class. During the day, I found that continually engaging the students with questions not only helped me gauge their understanding, but also ensured their participation. During my time in different classrooms, I began to formulate my philosophy of teaching and my idea for classroom management. I think in my future classrooms, I'll have just one rule: respect, which can be defined and manifested in many ways. Respect for others, respect for self, respect for the school, respect for its rules and its property, respect for the teacher, and even respect for the learning process. I think I might ask the students at the beginning of school, what makes a great class? Then, in light of my one rule, allow them to create other rules that are more specific and support the idea of respect. I've applied this simple concept of respect in classrooms where I substitute teach, and it's worked really well. One particular experience I'm very proud of was when I was subbing a 6th grade class at John Brown Elementary. While teaching the reading lesson, I noticed one student pass a note to another. I was going to wait until after the lesson to discuss it with them, but about 10 minutes later, one of the young ladies in the class brought it up to me. This is the note. Now, for the video assignment, I obliterated their names, but they had all signed it. I was so moved, it almost brought me to tears, which, being a typical male, it's not easy for me to admit. I'm going to cherish this forever. I'm even considering attaching it to future resumes as a letter of recommendation. I had a similar experience subbing at STEM Charter Academy, except the students wrote on the whiteboard just before class ended. I almost made it through the entire week without having to issue a single disciplinary pink slip. However, 15 minutes before the end of the school week, one student forced my hand by his behavior. And I think that's where this message in the middle of the whiteboard came from. And yes, I'm proud of this as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed my video. This class has been most excellent. I want to thank Miss Ballard and everyone else in the class. And gosh, I wish you the best in all of your future endeavors.